Hello, hello, hello. It's time for No Brush Required again with myself, Tamara Grant, and Barbara Reade, who's coming on. And
Hey, hello. Hey, long
how
time no
are you
see.
doing? Hello, hello. I know. We just had a little behind the scenes chat before we started, just
Mhm.
to make sure that we
Oh,
were on the
oh,
same
oh.
page. No pun intended.
Oh, good.
Tamara's here and Rina's here and got lots of people here today. So just a quick, are we going to do a hi, how are you?
Well, we
Or are
can
we
do
going
a
to
hi,
just
how
jump
are
right
you? And
in?
then I think we need to do a disclaimer or something. Not a disclaimer, but a heads up. A heads up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A heads up. How's everybody doing today? I'm going to just turn my volume up and hopefully I don't like turn us off. Oh,
I
I'm
just turned
afraid to
mine
touch
up.
anything. Forget it. Forget it.
That's as high as I can go.
Okay.
Was I
I
not
can hear you better now.
hearable? Here.
No,
Oh, okay.
no. It's my volume. It was my volume. That's okay. I'm great today,
Oh,
except for
oh,
look.
I got mine. I got mine. I got new tubes. Oh,
Um, mine's on its way. Mine's on its way.
woohoo!
Kyle's here. Look at Douglas is here. I saw Catalina from Chile. Lots of friends are here today. I guess everybody's
Wait.
been busy reading for
To
the
me,
last
you
six
know what?
weeks,
I'm a
right?
fairly quick reader. Rina, how you doing? She said she's got COVID.
Douglas, did it snow in Seattle? Did you guys get an inch of snow overnight too? The horror.
See, I'm quite
We
jealous of
did.
that. It's just cold. It's just really, really cold. We have snow on the ground. But of course, next week it's going to be mild and rain and everything's going to disappear. So I've planned a snowshoeing outing with a friend of mine on the weekend. And it's probably going to be the last snow I see until next winter.
Oh, yeah. Amy said as well that she's got snow down in Seattle. Oh, well, that's just what happens in the
Yeah,
winter
not
around here,
like the
right?
old days.
Hi, Nadine. How
Ah,
are you? Another new book. Yes, we're looking forward to today
yes.
too, so we should probably get going. Um, so before we start, shall we just talk a little bit about how we're going to do this? Because so today is our long-awaited book club, first book club meeting. Picasso's War we've been reading, and hopefully a bunch of you guys have been reading it as well and want to talk about it. And you know, we've been in book clubs before in person where everybody gets a chance to say something, and that's kind of hard to do with this technology because Barb and I are on the screen, you guys are at home commenting in the comments box, and hopefully some of you will pop on screen and join us. And so I think what we'd love to do is to try to keep that conversation within the screen, because if everybody starts chatting on the comments thread, we're not going to be able to see it. And then you're going to feel like you're not part of the conversation because we're not going to be able to
Get
acknowledge
mad
every
at
single
us and
comment
don't
that
get
goes
mad
by.
at
Unless,
us.
of course, um, yes, we're presuming that there's just going to be so much conversation here that we can't keep up. But that being said, our thoughts were to throw out some ideas for topics of conversation, and anybody who feels like they want to pop on, all you need to do is do that request to join, and we'll pull you on video wise here, and you'll be able to
Yes.
converse. And we can have 4 of us on it at any one time,
Mm-hmm.
and you can chat for a few minutes, and then we can turn the mic over to anybody else who wants to come on and try to make sure everybody gets a chance to say what they want to say, and we can be part of the conversation
Which is
without
hard.
having to just monitor comments
Yeah,
the whole
and
time.
it was such a deep dive into the topic. There's so much to talk about. I just thought I'm going to throw this out there. If you enjoy the book, do you want to give us a heart?
Yay!
So if you enjoyed the book, send us a heart. Haven't seen any yet.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay. You can put your hearts in the
there we
comments,
go.
or
Now here they
that
go.
works.
Here they go. It
There
was a
we go.
big book. It was a very in-depth. Oh, yay! Lots of hearts. So lots and
Yeah.
lots and lots to go to talk about with that. Um,
Yeah. Um, maybe we should just start with like a quick intro, because I know there are people who haven't read it. And the title of the book is actually a little deceptive. So it's called Picasso's War, How Modern Art Came to America. And Picasso really isn't the central figure in the book. He's one of many artists who whose work is primarily situated in Europe, and there's a number of key figures that most of us probably don't even know, that we wouldn't have known about as artists, who were instrumental in getting modern art from Europe to North America. And so the book is actually a lot, it's true, it's based on letters and telegrams and correspondence between the main characters. But those characters are, you know, a lawyer named John Quinn, who lived in New York City in the early 19th century, the first museum director, Albert Barr of the MoMA, and then two art dealers who were primarily situated in Europe, Paul Rosenberg and Henry Conweiler. It's quite fascinating, because these guys, these are the people that knew Picasso, knew Matisse, knew what was going on in the art world, and were struggling to collect it and to import it to America. So Picasso is one of them, and one of the, I guess Picasso and Matisse are the primary artists that they talk about. And then there's a lovely kind of full circle thing that ties Picasso's painting Guernica, which is about war and was, you know, triggered by the Spanish Civil War. The last part of the book, they talk about that. So there's just your little overview of what it's about. And
and like
could go from there.
I'm just going to grab this right out of a phenomenal article in the New Yorker magazine written about the book. Came out in, I think, June of this past year. And it gives a nice little summary. So for anyone who hasn't read it, I'm just going to read this right off of here. Back when all of life was offline, so not like today, back when to buy a record, you had to actually go to a record store. Back when there were record stores, the infrastructure required for cultural goods to get from creation to consumption had many more moving parts. And really, this is about bringing modern art to America, creating an art market. So these parts are the principles of Eakin's story. So his focus, as Tamara said, is not on the big name modern artists like Picasso and Matisse. Picasso is almost like a symbol of the whole modern art movement. They're off stage for most of the book. And the figures are people that we've never really heard of: the dealers, the gallery owners, collectors, curators, and critics. And they're referred to basically as the art world. So there's this whole bigger discussion about the art world and who creates art and who decides which art is good and which art is worth seeing and which art is worth purchasing. So I loved that whole side of the book, and really thinking about that and putting it in context today too, where it's completely different. So
right. Okay, I had a quick question. Rina wanted to know how to, just before we go any further, if you'd like to come on and chat, there's a little button at the bottom of your screen. It's a video camera with a plus symbol in it. If you click on that, that will send a request to join. And when I accept it, your face will pop up on the screen. So make sure that you're wearing clothes and you have your camera facing you and all the rest of it, so that you're ready to be on screen with us. Okay, no surprises today. Yeah. Well, we came up with a few questions ahead of time that we posted on our Instagram feed, and you know, what do we want to talk about? Where do we want to start with? I liked your point of, Rina, I'll invite you on just a second then. How much, who decides what is good and worthy of collecting in anticipation of it being widely accepted? And so in this book, what was interesting is that this lawyer, this, you know, rogue lawyer, John Quinn, sorry, he had this he amassed this huge collection of Picassos and Matisses, and he was a bachelor. He made a lot of money as a lawyer. He wasn't married. He had money to burn, and he invested in paintings. And oftentimes he wouldn't have even seen these paintings ahead of time, because, so as Barb mentioned, there's no online way to view things. So if he was interested in seeing what was going on in Paris, he had to either go to Paris or get someone to take some, early photos of things and send them to him. And he just had to almost buy on spec. And he amassed this huge collection of art that he didn't even hang in his New York apartment. It was just stacked against the walls, or he would have a masterpiece sitting on his dresser so he could look at it when he was in bed. And so he was deciding what was good and what was valuable, but he was not able to convince other people that this work was good and valuable.
Yeah.
In America, right? Yeah. I'm just going to grab Rina because she's not seeing the button. It's possible if she's on an iPad or a computer, she won't see it. Rayna, I just sent you an invite.
Hi.
There she is.
Hi.
I'll hang in here for a few minutes. My voice is okay. So, hi, my friends.
Hi.
Good to see you.
How are
So
you?
nice to see you.
Your introduction to the book was just fantastic. So I've just been going through it and picking out some passages and some general themes that really struck me. And there were a couple things. And the thing that stands out to me the most, it's sort of uplifting in many ways, is the power that one individual can have who's persistent and determined. Because if John Quinn and Alfred Barr had not pushed as hard as they did and taken as many risks as they did and pursued their dreams all the way to the halls of Congress, over to Paris, it would have happened eventually, a Museum of Modern Art, but probably not as soon. So that really struck me because it really is the story of those two men, as you said, Barbara. And then the other theme was just as an American citizen, just this sort of concern about the resistance to the new that exists. This sort of schizophrenia in my country. I'm proud to be American, but there's definitely this sort of schizophrenia of embrace the new in terms of capitalist ventures and acquisition and invention and technology. But there is, on a deeper level, this sort of puritanical strain of just this resistance to anything that seems sort of overly graphic, earthy, morally repulsive, all of the terrible labels that were attached to this early art by Picasso and his peers. And there were echoes, and there was racial discord that played out in this as well. And there are echoes of that right now. So, we were reading about 1922, and here we are in 2022, 23, and the same strain of resistance exists. And I think that maybe that's always been, but it just struck me, it really struck me in this book.
I had read a really interesting interview that Hugh Eakin did, and he talked about, the ideas, and this is relevant to what you just said, but Americans being, resistant. The work was thought to be subversive, but also the other underlying theme was an element of cultural insecurity in not wanting to take on another culture, but try to find their own culture, because it, it's still a fairly new country.
Well, it's still a young country. Right? I think we're an adolescent country, actually, with all the good and bad of that. But I want to mention before I forget is being interested about Paul Rosenberg. I mean, the influence of the dealers also. For all of you listening, I bet you found that interesting, because I certainly did, in the different approach of Kahnweiler and Paul Rosenberger. There's a short book, I promise, short, and very interesting, by Paul Rosenberg's granddaughter, whose name is Anne Sinclair, and she wrote My Grandfather's Gallery. And it goes more deeply into the Rosenberg family and about that scary, scary time with he, as a French Jew, really had to go into exile and then finally made the decision to move to New York City. Right. So I recommend that book.
That's a great recommendation.
Yeah. And that's the other whole underlying part of this book that we didn't even talk about. You have to think about, the time period, First World War, Second World War, Great Depression, lots and lots of different things are happening that are, there's a lot of serendipity involved in actually getting these paintings to America. And that had to do with politics. And
they were driven, a lot of the
culturally.
artists were driven out of Europe
They
for
were.
fear for their lives, which was a blessing to the United States and to the whole
was.
modern art movement. But the world that had supported them before, like Germany and Russia, and they had to leave because they were now a target, and they were considered subversive and somehow undermining the whole value system over there. This is art. This is the power of art.
For those of us who read Ninth Street Women as well, there was a lot of talk about how it was the end. Paris is no longer the art world. Supreme irony. Certainly Moscow is not. Certainly Berlin is not.
No, Moscow would not.
Supreme irony. The center of the modern art world is New York City. So we hope that John Quinn is up there, looking down and understanding that happened. But I just want to say one more thing, and then I'm going to get off. Let somebody else get on. And that is, I love the anecdote in here, just the story behind Guernica. I hadn't read that quite so fully before. And the fact that Picasso had been depressed, and that he was in his personal life with what was going on with his wife Olga, and with this woman he loved so, Marie-Therese Walter, and that he was in a real funk. And this may have been the time that he took off a year one time and didn't paint and wrote poetry. And I think this is when that happened. Then his friends in Spain said, wake up, you come down and see us, come to Spain. And he went to Guernica, and boom, one of the most famous paintings, maybe one of the most moving paintings ever, he created. I really loved that part of this book. I thought it was really
well, and his work before that, and after that, was quite apolitical. And he prided himself on that. He wasn't influenced by politics. He wasn't influenced by anything else other than what was going on in his studio.
Okay, I'm going to sign off now and hope somebody else jumps in. This is a great idea. I'm going to keep listening, but I'm just going to get off the screen.
Thanks, Rina.
All right.
Feel
Thanks
better.
for joining us today, Rina. And thanks for, I think you shared this book early on, so thank you for doing that as well. Yes. Yes. Well, and to just jump on the thing that Rina just said too about him not painting for you, these are some little anecdotes and things that I found amusing about reading the book, that for a while he didn't paint because he was actively being divorced from his wife, and the laws were such that anything that she got 50% of everything that he created, even while they were estranged. So he said, I'm not painting.
And he was depressed too, which you don't think of about Picasso. But he didn't marry again until she died. And then he married Jacqueline Roche at the very end of his life, who of course was like 60 years younger than he was or something. But anyway, all the anecdotes about Picasso were wonderful. So thanks for doing this. How do I get off? Or do you send me off?
You find an X in one corner of your screen.
Bye.
I was actually surprised. I didn't realize that he and Matisse had such a rivalry.
I didn't either. And then what was the show that he decided to do because Matisse had done something and he wanted to better him?
Well,
that wasn't the New York show.
There were so many
that was a show in Paris,
to
I
get
think.
Picasso to send his work. I have to say, Picasso.
Yes.
I was surprised reading this book, but he wasn't the way I thought he was. I thought, he was fired up about politics and very passionate. He was kind of like, he would disappear for months on end. He wouldn't correspond with his dealers, who were basically getting his work out there. He'd kind of ignore their requests. He'd change his mind. He'd say, yes, I'm happy to send all my paintings over. And then at the last minute, I don't feel like it. He'd hang on to his most powerful pieces and not share them. Just the way he operated it was so interesting.
Well, and then he had a relationship with one dealer, but another dealer was trying to get in between them, and so he was painting work that his primary dealer didn't know about it, and he was having to try to hide it from his primary dealer when the primary dealer had a gallery on the same street in Paris. So he had to be careful that that guy didn't just stop into the studio and want to see the work, because he was making work for somebody else. Really fascinating.
I find him terribly likable, you know, and just kind of his own quirky self, I guess. In order to be that prolific and paint that much and be so creative, you just march to your own drum and you don't really care what other people think.
Yeah. And for me too, not, you know, I realized how long of a lifespan he had as an artist, but I didn't realize how many different art movements he had been a part of, which was fascinating to me, you know, right from post-impressionism to surrealism to cubism. And his work was kind of the leading edge of all of them.
And he's
that's kind of fascinating.
I mean,
too.
he just created and created and created, and he didn't stick to one particular style. He was always, it sounds like he was always pushing himself to do something completely different. So not a consistent style. I wonder today, in today's art world, would that be acceptable? Because, you know, they say, if you're an artist, your work needs to be recognizable.
I guess part of it is, I don't know. It feels like there's less of a delay now between the making of the work
Like
and the showing of the work than there was then.
And people are,
the news cycle is so much
people are
shorter,
finishing paintings
right?
in days versus months, and getting them out there. So
yeah. No, and I agree. I think the rivalry probably did make them grow as artists. And that makes me wonder, you know, because Barb and I have talked a bit about this before. What does what happened then have to say about what happened now? Or are there any corollaries, you know? And do we see this with artists now? Are there rivalries between well-known artists? I mean, I have no idea.
Yeah,
that's something that certainly, I mean, seeing other people's work and how other people are succeeding, air quotes, does affect all of us, right? We comment on that when we can see artwork on our phones on a daily basis and see how much else is being produced out there. It has a, you know, it has an unconscious, a subconscious effect on what we're doing. But it must have been interesting for them because they probably didn't visit each other's studios, and they wouldn't know what the other was doing until somebody had a show that was a success. And now I want that show too.
Yeah, it's pretty. There were so many areas that I thought it'd be great to compare them with our times now, and they probably weren't really aware of what each other were doing, you know, because of distance, and you know, just there's no way to share what you're doing unless you're actually seeing the work in person. So they're kind of creating in isolation.
Right, but then what's interesting to me is that even if they were creating in isolation, how they were creating work that could be then categorized and grouped as part of the same movement. And, you know, this kind of gets to this whole question of how do we define movements in art? Are there currently movements in art that we just can't identify because we're in the midst of them? You can only see them, you know, when you step back and you see the bigger picture, looking back in time. I have a lot of questions.
Kind of in that digital age now, where art is going to be more of a digital process. Oh, Rina's wondering, is anyone else having trouble with the sound? I hope not.
Please tell us that we're not talking over each other, because that is all Instagram, if that is. Hopefully. Does anybody want to pop on? Luke, did you want to jump in and join us and have something to say in the conversation today?
And I can throw stuff. There was something I read too about...
Oh, she didn't have her speaker on.
There's something I read here about modern art, like current, contemporary. I would call it contemporary. Let's see. No, it's too long. Let's see if Luke wants to come on, and then I'll share it later. But just talking about now, and who determines the value of artwork, and who determines if something is good art or not. Is it the art critics? I'm not so sure that there is a huge role for an art critic anymore. Is it the galleries who decide? Is it museums who decide? Or who decides what is good art now? So just a question I'm tossing out there for anybody else who wants to jump in.
I don't know. I mean, I would love to say in an ideal world, it's the artist who decides what's good. But, oh, here's Luke.
I think Luke
Let's
and
see
I finished
what Luke
reading
has
this
to say.
about the same time. So,
Did you?
Luke,
Here he comes. Hi,
Hi,
Luke. How are
ladies.
you?
I wasn't prepared to come on camera. I'm off from my day job today and packing and painting and doing all sorts of things. So, how are you guys? So, thanks for inviting me.
oh, we're thrilled to have you. Otherwise, we'll just
Good.
be yakking
How
up
are
here
you?
to each other. It's nice to get somebody else jumping in.
Right. Well, Rayna, I don't know Rayna very well, but I mean, she had so many great insights in the book for sure. And one thing that she spoke about, which like as the book is done and I put it away on the shelf, I am fascinated by John Quinn.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, he gets some credit, I guess, but I really don't think he gets enough credit for having done what he's done. And I would love to read a biography on him. For sure, and know more about him, because he was really, in his time, he really had such a belief and a passion for the work, and he was alone. Like, there was very few people that really supported him at that time, and I was equally heartbroken, you know, to find out that the work, like his life's work, was then dismantled soon after he passed away, and then it just got
awful.
Spread all over the place. And so,
Yeah.
And that shocked me because he was a lawyer. As a lawyer, he didn't have a will. He didn't have, you know, instructions for what was to happen other than some vague verbal instructions
so he
to
could support
friends.
his, was it his sister and his niece or something?
right. The other thing that I'm left with is, you know, what is North American or the United States gain is unfortunately Europe's loss.
Yes.
And the way that the work was able to come here during that time in history, and fortunately or unfortunately stayed here for us, right? Like, we get to benefit with the fact that this work, which, you know, took so long to become appreciated, now rests here, really, you know, for the rest of time. So we're very fortunate to be able to go and see this work.
What do you think,
And
just a question,
Sorry.
what do you think, and I don't know what the answer is, so it's just one of those speculation things. What do you think changed with you know, people in society, that all of a sudden they were able to look at this art differently, when 3 decades prior to that they were horrified, disgusted, they made fun of it? Even art students, remember the art students from Chicago who had the mock Matisse copies, and they were burning the Matisse, his lovely sweet paintings, you know, like what changed for people that all of a sudden they could be more open to it?
Well, I think there's always two things that go on with that. I mean, one is that people hopefully grow themselves, right? And society changes over time, and we become more acceptable or open to things that previous generations were not. And that continues today as well, in the form of politics or tolerance towards, you know, races, and it goes on, and art is part of that. So I think that that's one thing that, you know, society just fortunately does grow and learns to be more open to things that otherwise, or in the past, they weren't so much open to. But also, I think that there is, certainly in the world of art, there is this cachet that's attached to things once people in high regard suggest that it's good. And then, you know, so there's a bit of jumping on the bandwagon, I think, sometimes. And if you can, and even today, if you can get someone of high regard to say that this work is good, then all of a sudden it does bring along a greater audience than you would be able to do on your own. So I think that happened then too.
This took a long time.
Picasso wasn't, as we've already said, he wasn't really working all that hard to promote himself. He relied on, and that I found really interesting as well, when you think of, you know, one of the most regarded artists currently in our time, that he was really made by those who were around him, who believed and helped prop them up.
Hmm.
So it was a great book. I don't know that I've ever read a book quite that long.
You haven't read Stephen King then, have you?
I have not.
Yeah. Or Night.
Or Ninth
I'm still
Street
reading
Women.
Ninth Street
I
Women.
guess I should put that on my list. But having said that, it was such a pleasure. Like, I didn't find it a struggle whatsoever. I would look forward to that time of, that time in the day or every second day where I would be able to sit down with it and go through another 30 or 40 pages. It became, I'm going to miss it, like, it became pleasurable.
Right. And for a piece of nonfiction, it was very much written as fiction, in the sense that there was a very strong story and narrative. The characters were very well described and integrated, and we did not know what was going to happen next, even though we knew that
Right.
the Museum of Modern Art eventually got built,
Right.
and these books ended up there, right?
Yeah, so Rina's asking, what are the art movements now? I think anything goes, because back when the modern artists were coming on the scene. Prior to that, it was all representational landscape, very sedate, sort of the old masters and all of that. And then these guys come in, and it's non-representational. Can you imagine flipping the switch so radically?
Yeah.
The Cubists and just like.
Well, women descending the staircase, like looking at some of those images, you're like, now we look at them and we think, wow, that's incredible. But at the time, if you weren't seeing work like that, it's completely
I can still look at that piece you just mentioned, and you have to sort of really spend time with it to see what, and because you know what it's called, like you have the benefit of that, but you have to really spend your time with that to find out what's in there, right? And I followed your advice and did very much what you did, and I had my phone beside me, and so that when any painting was referenced that I wasn't quite so familiar with, I would always look it up so that I had that visual image in my head then too about what it was. Yeah,
I had to look up just about every painting because I thought I knew what it was, and then I would Google it and go, okay, that's not the one I thought it was.
Right.
The musicians and the what's the one, the huge Picasso with the prostitutes.
I love that.
Mademoiselle d'Avignon.
How
Mademoiselle d'Avignon.
Shocking that was, and how even one of where it ended up before it made its way over to New York, the wife would not allow that painting to be hung in certain parts of their home because it was just like, oh my God. But now I can't even imagine that would.
I'll take it.
I'll take it. Yeah. I think Catalina wanted to share something.
I don't know. Yes, Catalina, okay. I'm going to try to invite you.
Oh,
sure.
Oh, here's her question. Just a second. Let me see if I can find her. Yeah, it's possible. I just have to. Nope. Where? Just a second, because I think you're not on my.
Yes.
Are we still on?
You haven't sent us into
I just nobody was talking, so I'm like.
I'm still thinking about what movement are we in now, because there is no one kind of art being produced. There are people who are representational artists painting the landscapes, and then there are the abstract artists, and then there's the digital artists, and I think everything is out there. So what does that mean? 20 years ago? Hi. Welcome.
Catalina, nice to have you.
Thank you. It's been great to have the chance to get into this conversation. It was something absolutely out of the plan. I was looking for something, and suddenly you appeared, and this was going on since the beginning. Well,
yep.
Yeah.
Where are you,
Absolutely.
Rina? Before you look somewhere warm.
Yeah.
We're all bundled up in Canada.
Oh wow, we're absolutely in the other end of the world. I'm in Chile, and by the beach, like out of town, out of Santiago for a few weeks of vacation, holiday, and then I go back to work like in 3 more days. But it's been lovely. This summer has been very, very warm. what it shouldn't be. Where I am, it shouldn't be this warm.
Yeah.
So again, the same theme.
Climate change.
Climate change.
Mhm.
Okay, so going back from what I wanted to share, well, I haven't read this book, but I've read two others
Mhm.
in which the life of Picasso is very present.
Mhm.
I will send you by a message to you the name of those two. One I bought it in English, and the other one I bought it in Spanish, but I know it's written in English, which is called Picasso and the War, and it has number 1 and number 2,
Okay.
like two,
Mhm.
and it's amazing. That book shows you like every stage of his life,
Mhm.
what was going on. But I'm not absolutely sure if that's the name, so I will write you internally. But when I wanted to comment about what's considered art in Chile, you have to understand that we are like an undeveloped country. We have electricity and all that, but in terms of what it's the international classification of a developed country, we aren't that classification. And I'm an artist too, but I'm an artist in the stand of not showing my work, okay? But I've been working for many years, and I only share my work with my friends. So going back, why have I done this? It's because in Chile, it's a very like the elite culture of Chile, which is the 1% of the population of 7 million people of population, 17 million people. We're only 1% of it, okay? And the mass of this 1%, the massive movement, like opinion and movement around what is art, goes through what are critics, okay? What are written news, newspapers, we still are attached to that. And also very strict from what school you come, where did you study art or architecture or something close to what's art. And also, so that's one thing. First thing, if you are from the elite. Second, you've been studying in a very high university in which there are only 3. O sea, it's nothing, Then, it's a few number. Then, what's your last name? If you had somebody in your family, who you are. And that's been going on for many decades. There are a lot of new artists. My teacher, like I had different teachers, but my last teacher, he has all these records, and he teaches a lot of new artists, and he makes artist galleries sends them to a gallery and do a whole show. But the ones that are able to buy and to pay for what is a good art don't go to those places, because they're going to buy a piece of someone that nobody knows. So going back, the ones that have good art, which there are few in Chile, since my point of view, that have a new proposal and something like Sami Ben Mayor, for example. Sami Ben Mayor is someone that has produced completely different, in which I think there's something close to what's Matisse. It's modern, with a lot of intense coloring, but the rest, it's art only. And because they become important, and because there's a whole thing behind them. So my question is, how someone that is conscious of this, who I know people that are in the art business, and more than in the business, in the intellectual and the brainstorming of what we can do with art in Chile, there are ideas in which I can move to make this change in a piece of sand in the beach, but just that.
interesting overview of what's going on down there, I think.
Yeah, it seems so different than what we're seeing here in North America, where, you know, anybody with social media who makes art can show their work and share their work and find a following.
Yes.
Certainly there are gatekeepers. I mean, you know, galleries. I don't know what percentage of artists show in galleries. I would guess it's probably a pretty small percent. And those gallerists are still, the people in charge of the galleries are you know, deciding what is good enough to be in the galleries. Also, the people who have money to buy paintings, you have to think about consumers, and they also do drive.
I would say a lot
those
of it
decisions,
would it not be based on sales and sales history. So if an artist sells well, they're going to end up in a number of different galleries because, you know, the proof is they sell well. They're a sure thing. It would be tough to take a chance on somebody who doesn't have that track record. So they're not sure if they should call it good art yet. Is it only good art if it sells? If you're a gatekeeper? I don't know.
Excuse me, what's the question?
Yeah.
Oh, is it only good art, if we're talking about what's the criteria for good art, if you're one of the gatekeepers, like a gallerist, is it good art if it sells? And if it doesn't sell, is it not good art? There's something wrong with it.
It's something that it could be. It's art. There's a lot of artists in this country, but they're not recognized because they are not able to get into the gallery and have a show. And why you don't have a show? Because they think that you won't be able to sell your art because you're not known.
Right.
So it's like the egg and the hen.
It's a
circle.
It's a catch-22. The gallerists have to pay rent. They have expenses. They have to, you know, they do the promotional materials. Like they have a lot of costs that are incurred. And if you're an unknown, you're kind of like, you know, until you prove yourself worthy, you might not necessarily get to show in a gallery. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I think it's a bad thing in terms of that only galleries are recognized as the ones that can determine what is good, what is a piece of art. And also the critics. You know, there are like 2 critics in Chile that they are so hard, and all the artists, you know, that they're like, they feel that they're great critics, no sé cómo, because you know that English is not my first language.
I know, you're doing really well.
Great.
Like they are famous and they're known, and they write once a week in a newspaper that's very famous, and they decide who has done when they go for a show, and it's a show of somebody that has all the list of what you should have, but it's someone new. They're all this guy is always very tough on them, and so it's very hard to be brave to be there. Okay, so they have asked me to be in a gallery, and I don't want to be there because I don't want them to hurt my feelings. O sea, for me, art is part of my life, and I don't want someone that's an old guy that feels that he's comes from God, and he can. And I've been reading his papers, and it's always the same. So it's when you have such a small society who decides, there's a time when you have to break the glass and produce a crisis. The only thing, when these things are so tied up and so well tied, that what I think sometimes is to produce like a crisis, to break this, to produce like a breakdown. But
or something, a breakthrough, or something very, very different.
Yes, absolutely. But I don't want to be in charge of that.
That's such a tough one, eh?
Yeah. And when I've been talking this to others artists, they look at me and they say, "Let's look for somebody else to do it." I'm like, okay, pass on to another. Okay, that's what I wanted to share. I don't want to take
I'm
more
so
of the
glad
time of our day.
All right,
so glad
thanks.
you came on. Honestly, that was just wonderful listening to you talk and explain yourself and put more information out there for us to think about. Thank you.
Great. Okay.
Really appreciate
Thank
it.
you
know,
Thanks,
for
Marlena, for
letting
coming.
me in.
All right.
Anytime.
No
We're here every
worries.
Tuesday.
We hope we see you
Okay.
again.
No, I will follow you. Absolutely, I will follow you.
Yep.
Then
We're always
I'll
looking
talk
for
to
artists
you
to
by.
interview too.
Excuse me?
Wink, wink. We're always looking for artists to interview. Luke was on a couple weeks ago. Yeah, we love doing that.
Well, there will come a time in which that could
You
be.
got it. You got it.
All right.
Now, okay.
All right. Thanks again.
You too. Thank
So,
you very
care.
much.
you're welcome. So I'm
You're
kind of laughing because I
welcome.
think about conversations we've had in the past about, advice about how to approach a gallery. It's almost like you have a special instruction manual. Okay, it's almost like don't look them in the eye. Don't ever introduce yourself at an opening. Like there's so many rules for artists, and I get why they have to be there, right? These guys can't always, but it's hilarious. Like the artists are the ones that have to figure out the best way to approach a gallery and get their attention without offending them or being too pushy or any of those things, right?
Hey,
Oh,
I've also got
That's a
Nadine
good
waiting, so
point.
I'm going to ask
think that's
one of
sorry.
you guys
That's a
to
good
X
point
out.
because that's what
Okay.
Matisse was doing at one point, not
Yeah.
showing his work to
Yeah.
produce more expectations. Okay.
so we got to bounce one of these guys out of here.
Cool.
You guys,
Yep. One of you guys has to X out, so you have to hit your X at the screens because I can only have 4
I'm
people
looking
on the
what's
screen at a
behind
time.
Luke.
Bye.
I like what's behind Luke. I don't know. That's so cool.
Sorry,
I know. I'm looking
I was
at
going to
the
go because I've
painting
been on the
behind
longest,
Luke.
but I'm happy to hang out.
looking at the piece of art behind you. So
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
yeah. Hey Nadine. Oh, you're in your
Say
studio.
hi to Nadine now.
I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Because I have headphones in, so I just want to make sure you can hear me. Hi, everybody. Not
Have
in
you met
person.
Luke
Hi, Luke.
before?
Hi.
Luke,
We
this is Nadine.
chat behind the
Nadine,
scenes
this is
once in a
Luke.
while.
Yeah.
Quite a bit, I think. Yes.
Yeah. Great to see you guys. I miss your faces. Amazing book.
Yeah.
I love this book. I think the writing was excellent. I was really sad that it ended. And I think for me, I learned, because I don't have any art history background, it's sort of what I read now. I'm, on a knowledge, hunt for knowledge. I was really surprised at some of the things I learned about the movement, modern art movement, right? Not so much about Picasso too. I agree with you, Barb. I thought he was sort of like a spoiled child almost,
Yeah.
right? But John Quinn, amazing. Like what he did for modern art. It's so sad. I was so sad when the people that could have stepped up to the plate to keep his collection together didn't. It's so nice that some of it's come back to the United States and back to the MoMA, and also how hard they worked for it, like Alfred Barr, like incredible, right? To have that kind of conviction in a time where, again, it's such a new thing that it's not accepted, right? And to have the vision, because it's kind of like, it's sort of like our own work. So, you started a certain way, or you start really sort of traditional paintings, and then you have people around you that care more for that as you grow and change, right, into, let's say, abstraction, something. It takes time for people to learn what that is, or to start to appreciate those things. And I think, I think in terms of like the war and what that did for modern art, I think people were looking for something to spark some sort of feeling. Like it was such a horrific time for the world that, people are looking for joy, or they're looking for something to not inspire, but to make them feel something. And I think it's all good. It was all perfect timing, really. Right?
But how scary
Mhm.
too for the artists and the gallery owners in Europe to have to put their paintings in secret locations so that they weren't confiscated by the Nazis. And as it turned out, a lot of them did end up having their collections pillaged. And I just kept thinking, I hope they were careful when they were stealing these works, not to deface them out of some kind of rage or, revenge. That whole part was just so.
Didn't you wonder? I mean, I was left wondering about all the paintings that didn't get saved, that we never saw.
Right.
We know the provenance of pieces that have made it into permanent collections, and when they've been in hiding during the war, and whose hands rescued them. But I just was wondering,
Kicking around
there's got
somewhere.
to be some huge number of things that were lost, and what are we missing? What were those? What are the pieces of the history of modern art puzzle that those
heartbreaking,
paintings
right?
would fill?
Someone asked what book we're talking about, Picasso's War. But you know what? Yeah, I thought about that when they first started buying their art, because some of them were 500, some of them were like 700, 1,000, and you think about what people, the value and what they view, if it's an important piece of art, whether they kept them. Like how many pieces of art went missing even before the war, things that we never saw, right? I kept thinking that every time someone bought something and then it went somewhere else, I thought, I'm sure there were hundreds of pieces of art that never have been seen.
Or even destroyed by a vindictive wife when one of the divorces was happening. I'll show you. I'm going to burn those drawings that you made.
Yeah.
Very tenuous. We know. We're also gotta keep stuff out of the sunlight. You can't stack it this way. Can you imagine? We know what that's like, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Safe. And
Anyway,
they're not
it was
dangerous times here in Canada. So
I loved that book. I just bought, like I said, Fierce Boys, Helen Frankenthaler's story today. Did you?
I just finished
Okay, I know it's
finished
a
it last
different
night.
read. This book was written so well that I would love to read anything else he writes. It was really good. But I'm going to read the book about her, and because it's so, I find it's so interesting, and it kind of, I don't know, it inspires me in my own work, right?
Yes.
So great pick.
I have to say, finishing it, as I was reading it, I was thinking, I wish I'd read this before we went to Roma in September.
I think that, I know, I agree. Totally.
Now we'll look at those paintings differently. They'll have a story to them, and they've traveled. It reminds me of The Red Violin. Did you ever see the movie The Red Violin?
Yes.
And the journey that the violin took. Okay. Do we need to repeat the title again? I guess a couple people coming at the end.
We do. We've just been talking. We've been talking for almost an hour about this book here, Picasso's War: How Modern Art Came to North America, or to America. So this broadcast will be saved afterwards, and if you want to go back and listen to all of the other things that have come up in the last hour, that would be great. And watch out, because we'll be doing another book club book sometime in the next 6 to 8 weeks.
So great pick, girls. Thank you, Luke. It was so good to meet you finally in person, or as in person as we can get.
This is pretty close. Yeah,
pretty close.
And Nadine, you're going to come back because we want to see your studio. So one of these days,
I would love that. Yeah, anytime. This is where I am, so you're always welcome.
Oh, you will hear from us.
Okay, girls.
Okay.
Yeah. And next you're in Toronto, right? Nadine?
I'm in Calgary.
I know, but next time you're in Toronto.
You and I will definitely, we'll have an artist date. We'll go look at art, and we'll have lunch, and it'll be fantastic.
Me too.
And you too.
Yeah.
Tamara, you might have to come. Yeah. Okay, bye everybody.
Thanks for coming on.
Okay.
Well, I'm going to be the timekeeper because we're getting close to the end. I think we could probably keep talking about this because it's almost like playing hopscotch. You jump on one idea and you chase it for a while, and then there's another idea that we could follow. And there is so much to unpack with this book. So.
Yes, other book Nadine spoke about that she said
No,
she
the one
loved?
that
I thought it was this
Oh.
one.
Right.
Oh, it's called Fierce Poise, and it's a book about Helen Frankenthaler. She's just started it. I finished it last night. Not as engaging a read as this, because there's not as much of a narrative, but really interesting if you want to know more about her as an artist in
Right.
her life. So,
Yeah.
all right, people are saying bye.
I guess we better
I guess
sign
we're
off, and I
saying
guess
bye.
If anybody has any recommendations over the next couple of weeks, we'd love to hear your recommendations for books. Always
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, we'll put a post out. We'll put post out asking, and then maybe we'll do a little poll. And of those of you who are interested in, pursuing this kind of a virtual book club, how did we do today? I don't know. Hopefully we.
Nobody cried, meaning us. Anyways,
That's true.
have a good rest of the week, everybody. Thank you to our pop-ons.
All
Thanks for
right.
having me on.
We will
Bye.
see you
Our
soon.
pleasure.
Thanks so much,
Bye-bye.
Lou. Bye.